Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Sorry, Karen, my time must be a little off, my clocks in my house.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hey, Amy. Berg, where are you? Wall of China?
I'm in the Adirondacks now.
Oh, my goodness.
Send me to the Wall of China. That's cool. Oh, the Adirondacks is pretty good too.
Well, we had a really, I know people are slowly joining us. We had a nice response to the senior and junior surveys. As soon as Mark gets here, he did a nice job with 497, and Tanya and Trippy and me, we worked 424 for the juniors.
You're saying there was a high response rate?
Yeah, we had a really nice response. It was about 88%, I think.
That's awesome.
I mean, it helps with a little incentive, you know, extra credit is always a good thing.
Sure, yeah.
It solves everybody's problem. I think if we could just give the world extra credit, maybe.
Field hours, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Field hours.
Oh, my gosh.
Stuff.
Karen, what was it that you gave them field hours for? Oh, my gosh. They were just like, they just pounced on it. It was like.
All you gotta do is say field hours and that's it. For the seniors, at least.
Yeah, the seniors. Seniors are like, what? What is that? Oh my goodness. I was reading the senior comments. I don't know. You know, I didn't screen anything if they spelled it the way they spelled it or
they spelled it. Yep.
I just, you know, everything's in there. But I thought it was fascinating. I thought, Karen, you would appreciate this. I think we need to know more about field. And I'm like, didn't you just finish an entire year of field? Or I'm sorry, did I miss that? I don't know. I just.
Well, I will take my.
James, you got Shabaka back there?
Oh my goodness.
Are you serious?
He's sitting in on the meeting today, yeah.
You know, that's going to be so, like, we'll be like, Jim, could you move? Because we want to see the movie.
Yeah,
Move out of the way, please. Oh my gosh.
That is so cool. Is that a filter?
Yeah. Oh, and it's just a background video. You can find little videos.
I'm gonna get the bubble guppies on mine, guys.
Oh.
I'm taking back to little kid land. Bubble guppies!
Yep.
Yeah.
Outside, everybody, outside.
Outside.
We're going outside. Yeah. Yep. That was Tanya's favorite show.
My kids loved that show.
To Granddad. I said, Granddad, Tanya loves this show. Granddad said, "Oh, that's just you. You know, you're just liking that show." And then I said, "Okay, Granddad. One day when Bubble Guppies come on, I want you to watch Tanya."
Yeah.
Bubble Guppy's song came on. Tanya, half diaper on, ran in front of the TV. Bubble Guppies!
Oh, that's awesome.
You know,
that's awesome.
I know what this kid likes.
Yep.
So dancing.
So Karen, I forgot for a moment that you were talking about your granddaughter, and I'm thinking to myself, Tanya Mallory's Day loves bubble guppies. Yeah. I had a moment there, so I'm back on the same page now. So, like, help me. Oh my gosh.
You know what? Tanya has grandchildren, so she might be bubble guppied.
Oh yes, true.
I'm bubble guppied because of granddaughter. I've been exposed to so many different shows that I am bubble guppied, I'm family reunion, I hate Chris, Bernie Mac. I mean, Tanya has just exposed, the Descendants. You
Oh my
know,
gosh.
I've been exposed to a lot. I've been in that room watching. Grandma, you gotta watch this movie. Okay.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen in this movie? Well, Grandma, I can't tell you. You just gotta sit down and watch it.
I know,
Okay.
because you have to watch it
Yeah.
because it's part of the process there. You know what I mean? It's
Okay.
like,
No hints, Tanya?
The worst that I ever
No.
had to sit through was Hello Kitty.
Oh
Anything Hello
God,
Kitty.
God. I'm
oh, hello.
tired. I'm tired of Hello Kitty.
Yeah.
I had a secretary when I was over at University of Rochester, and her entire office was done in Hello Kitty.
Oh.
Like the whole office, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, isn't that so cute?" And I'm like, "Really?
No.
Okay." Because we have we have
Mm-mm.
we have persistently and chronically mentally ill people that have to come and visit, and some of their delusions are on.
Yeah.
Like Hello Kitty, I don't think was really helpful in that regard. But
Watch the
maybe
video.
I don't know. Maybe I was missing something there.
But you know what? Hello Kitty is a really positive image to have for
It is.
children. It's just us adults at some point in time,
Uh,
we just get tired. I mean, I've been Hello Kitty to death between Tanya and her friends.
and there's
And when you have 4 or 5 little girls running
yeah.
around with Hello Kitty stuff everywhere you take them,
Yep. Yep.
I think I'll take Hello Kitty over Caillou.
no, I liked Caillou.
Oh yeah, I think we just got. I was not a fan of Caillou.
I liked
Caillou
Caillou.
was like Eeyore.
Yeah, I like Caillou though.
You
Tanya
guys,
used to go to sleep on Caillou.
I really think that somebody should write this up. Social work instructors' views on I don't know, what would we call it? Uh, children's cartoons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What about like Dora the Explorer?
she
She
was
was
great.
cool.
Yeah,
And her cousin was, I
Swiper no
forgot her
swiping.
cousin's name. What was her cousin's name?
Oh, I just always think of Swiper no swiping.
Yeah, no swiping. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, Dora was great.
Dora was great. Her cousin was great because he was always in the wildlife and jungle. So that was
Yeah, I'm trying
pretty
to remember his
cool.
name.
Even Chewbacca agrees with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we go ahead and get our spring retreat or advance or year-end summary, whatever we want to call it, going. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for taking time, because by this time, usually we're all like completely depleted, and
Yeah.
everyone has worked extremely hard this semester. And so thank you for doing this. We have, my goal would be to complete what we need to complete in 2 days. That's my goal. So we can start our yay summer vacation or whatever we're going to be doing. If we need to go into Wednesday morning, my hope is that we would be done by noon. Is that okay with everybody? The plan anyway. So a couple of little housekeeping things, and then we're going to dive right in. First of all, I think we need to have like a huge shout out to all of us, because we've worked, like, this whole year has been crazy, just crazy. And even though it's starting to kind of, maybe our lives are sort of, hopefully, I just want to say, the mother in me is saying, I hope you guys have all gotten vaccinated. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It's really, seriously, I've had 2 friends of mine. I'm sure you guys have friends of yours who, like, decided not to, and then they got sick. So please, 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 like, there's no, I don't, it's like you can't get into the conversation with them because it's just too bad. But I've had that. So please get yourself and all your family members vaccinated. So that's good. But it's been a crazy year. And Amy and Berg, I think we need to get a little tip of the hat, as Stephen Colbert on the Rapport used to say. You guys joined the faculty like you've never even like been on campus with us.
Yeah.
You'd only
Yeah.
see, you think that we just live in boxes. So, you know, and that is not easy. The students, everybody is yearning for people contact. That came through in the senior comments, I think pretty clearly, when they talked about what they struggled with. I mean, there were many things they struggled with, but one of the things they struggled with was the sense of isolation, disconnection.
Yeah.
And one of the things that helped them cope the most was their connection with others. So we just want to say, you know, thank you for struggling through remote land, and nice job. You've survived an entire year in that condition. So hopefully next year will be a lot better with all of us back on campus. That'll be great. So let's see, just two other things. One is, I just want to give a quick update on those pesky little course revisions. I want to thank everybody for all your work. We went from, we don't know where they are in February to, we know exactly where everybody is, and we know how, and we've made multiple revisions on everything. And we have about more than, currently, we have 8 of our courses that have made it through and are approved. 7 are pending. They are sitting in the SOP. So my guess is either they are floating with the curriculum committee. I know that 4 of them came back with suggested corrections, very simple, minor things. They were like formatting stuff that we just missed. And those corrections were made and resubmitted. So they are back up with SOP. So I'm sure that with the end of the year stuff, you know, Rita will get to them, like whatever that process is up there. And all I can see is that it's there. That's the only thing I can see. So I will follow up with her. I don't know how it works with the committee, because if they're using faculty, you know, everybody's turning into pumpkins May 31st.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, just so everybody's aware, but all of our course revisions are either ready to go to the Senate or in process at SOP. So I want to thank everybody for all your work on that. That is one less thing that we need to deal with in the fall. We'll obviously, they'll start working their way through the process. If we need to make edits and stuff, we will do that. But our major process today and tomorrow is going to be the curriculum, because you guys saw the tight timeline that we're on for it. So you know me, okay, thank you, Tori. You know me, I like to know when our deadlines are, because you know, I'm a little ADHD, so it's like squirrel, and I can get distracted very easily. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think we've done a lot of work this semester, so that will help, I think, be a nice platform to bounce off of and where we're going with stuff. So I apologize for my dog. He has to stay up here because we have a girl in season. So no, she's fine. She's, you know, anyway, but you know how boy dogs, when it's okay, you know more information than you want to know. So
Kathy, I
yes.
have a real quick comment. I read through everything that you sent except the stuff that came through the weekend. I just wanted to put this in our tickler system.
Okay.
We are required to have 33 credits of upper division courses. Before COVID hit, the Senate was talking about all majors requiring 45 courses, 45 credits of upper division.
Okay.
So I noticed that our core courses are not at 33. If it's easier to slide field over there as a core course to get you to that 33, go ahead and do it, because technically field is. I just want to make sure we're at the 33.
So 33 would be for higher, just so
it would be 11 3-credit courses.
Okay. And that is like 300 and 400 level courses?
Yes.
So 300 and 400 level courses.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because 220 then would not fall
220
into
would not count. No.
Okay. So
So I'm looking the department I look at. I saw you put criminal justice in there. The department I look at the most is sociology. I don't
Yeah.
know why, but the
They're good too.
right, they're good too, and they set it up where the electives are offered at a 3 and 400 level. So if we want to sort of define in this curriculum that students will be required they would have to be required to get at least one certificate. If we label it that way, that can also get us to that mandatory 33. But I want us to be prepared on the horizon, because I feel like we're going to come back to that requirement of 45 credits of upper division per department.
That's good to know as we're building the structure. You know, right now, you know, we've got what we got, and you walk through, so it's easy to meet that. Well, maybe not so much the 45, but the 30, 33. But as we're building it, that's really good, Karen. So thanks for bringing that. I've got a big circle around that on my notes. So that's really good.
No problem.
So any questions about any of that? Like, so the way that I'm envisioning that will work is we'll take a look at our current courses, just because if there's anything that we want to change or tweak or anything like that for next year, we get a chance to do that. I know that it probably seems a little like weird in that we're going to be working really hard to get the new curriculum built. But if you think about it, next year we're going to be running with the current curriculum will be running through the entire next year. But we have an opportunity, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, to get to 496 and 497, maybe using them a little bit. So, but there are some tweaks, and if this is an opportunity, as long as we're still doing practice behaviors, I had a momentary thought about flipping into competencies, but that would require that we have to redo all of our rubrics. And I don't know about you, but that about made me take the bridge. No offense to anybody, and no, you don't need to call the care team, but I'm just saying, I was like, no, like, don't do that. So we're still going to be using the practice behaviors and, you know, all of that. But that doesn't mean that if you, as we're thinking about it, as long as we stay consistent with that, if there's an assignment or something that you, in your experience, having taught the courses that you've taught, you would like us to change or adjust, and it doesn't really it does, you know, like, as long as it's, you know, allows that integration that we've talked about. And we have plenty of integration. That's, again, one of the themes that the students talked about, was this sense of doing the same thing over and over again. I know that's not our intent, and I know that that is not what we think about, but from their perspective, that's how it looks. But the really cool thing about their comments was they want more personalized, or more, what's the word I want? Personalized, like targeting of courses, which kind of fits into the conversations that we've been having about electives and creating certificates and things like that. So, you know, we haven't been talking to them about any of this. So it's sort of organic in terms of what they're saying to us, sort of fits with what we sort of experience as well. So if everyone's okay, unless there's anything else. If anyone needs to step away, I know, Karen, you put in the chat about needing to have to go, gonna go pick up Tanya. If anyone needs to step away, take care of childcare, whatever, feel free. This is like gonna be a free floating thing. We're gonna be here until noon, and then we are definitely taking a break. We're gonna walk away from the screens or do whatever it is you guys are gonna do. And then we'll be back at 12:30. And then I want to stop sharply at 3:30, because I just, you know, being on these screens all day is just, it's mind boggling. So is there any questions, thoughts, comments before we dive right in? Yeah, Berg, you got your hand up.
Well, I wanted to ask, or point out for later, whenever the time to discuss it is, Jessica's comment that the only PDs we actually report back to CSWE are 429, 496, and 4.
Right. Right. So,
I mean,
okay, let's just dive into that. So one thought, since we're in the process of changing, is to not necessarily, and I know it makes I'm creating tremendous amount of anxiety for myself. I'm just going to say it. I'm like, we might not collect information about practice behaviors in any of the junior courses. And that way we have a lot more freedom, right? We would collect them in the capstones, right? That's like 497, 496 field, like 493, 494, and 429, if I'm right.
Right.
So we could do that. Release ourselves from practice behavior task stream for the junior courses. So just think about it for a minute, because I had to go find Valium when I first thought about this. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, no, I'm not. But I think it's a thought. One, it kind of weans us off of practice behaviors, and we could, allow ourselves to really think about some of the assignments we do, as we think about the new curriculum, the ones that we think really capture what we're trying to, based on knowledge and skill, right? The knowledge and skill, and then the competency that we want to assess in a particular course. If they really help capture that, then we'll pull those over and bring them over. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. So I want you guys to just think about that idea. Yeah, Karen?
First of all, the idea of the senior courses, and I thought about this mostly over the past 2 weeks. We talked about field potentially measuring 2 levels of the practice behaviors and competencies. And I think to put that on field would be difficult because field may not be able to cover all of it alone. It would be perfect if 419, 429, 496, 497 is that second round of measurement, like Jess is talking about. For years, the idea was field would be the first layer. And while we have them do writing assignments, what I noticed most of all in my field visits, which I greatly appreciate, when there was, for lack of a better term, and I'm not suggesting this is what happened, when there was dissonance in terms of the student and the agency representative really trying to get an understanding of how to evaluate the student, we were able to come in from the academic side and say, well, based on your assignment, when you wrote about this part of it, you wrote about this and this and this, which would be consistent with what we're talking about right now. So to use those assignments as a second measurement would take away from how we use it with the field visit as that third person and say, well, wait a minute now, you're saying that this student didn't get that experience, but I read through that assignment that he or she was able to do A, B, and C. So that's number one. Number two, with the juniors, I've been task streamed, I've gone through DRF, I've gone through all of that stuff. Jess and Chris gets edible arrangements from me because that the work that goes into that is just crazy. But what would be helpful for me is, while a decision might be made to not use TaskStream for junior classes, and I totally understand why, if there's something that can give me feedback about what are those competency areas that the juniors were challenged with through the year, so that we can sort of readapt or reinforce some of those competencies in the senior year. Because when I looked at the outcomes of what was going on in the junior year and what were weak areas, we stepped it up in the fall semester and the spring semester to address those areas through field, to ensure that students would get those experiences or be able to teach the field instructors more about it or teach the students about it. So that data, I relied on it to help me with the student training, to help me with the field instructor training, and to help adapt kind of what our focus should be over the year.
So that's a good point, Karen. We'll roll that into the conversation.
Yep.
Keep in mind, so just to remind everybody what our time frame is. So this year, no, not time frame for the thing, but as you're raising that issue, so thinking about, there may be, if we don't use TaskStream, there may be a way to see how students are doing in general with the competencies that are not necessarily the practice behaviors, but we could identify what are
But
those
just the competencies that would be helpful.
And without asking everybody to rewrite all of their rubrics for all of their assignments, anything like that. So we might want to think about how we could do some review. I think, and we're going to move into looking at the overall, the documents that, like the TaskStream scores and things like that in a sec. But I think that if we can get creative about that, to kind of help with the transition, if we do this correctly, like if we're able to get through everything and submitting everything, because this is a program revision, by the way, this isn't just a course revision process. Target date for 2022 fall, that would be the new curriculum going online with juniors. The reason why it has to is because that we need 2 years of data collection for CSWE. That is, if we don't hit that, if we're not able to do that in the fall 2022, we're going to be sitting around in a holding pattern, which all of us, well, not all of us, but 3 of us have been in the last time, which was like excruciating.
It's excruciating.
There are lots of, so I just want to, like, this coming year, there's going to be a lot of work. We're going to be like driving through, but we can do it. We're smart people. So that's a good point, Karen. So I've got that in a second circle above the other circle.
And then the other piece, as I add on to 2022, which is important for us to look at, when we go into the second year, we have to be able to take feedback from 2022 to 2023 and show that we've implemented it in 2024, we got to show what were the areas and how we implemented them.
So that's what we're going to get practice doing today, because we didn't, I don't remember how we did it last year. I just really don't even remember last year because it just was so long ago. But that's what we'll do when we look at what do we think impacted the TaskStream scores that we got. I have some ideas.
I do too.
Let's start moving into that. So let's start taking a look at let's start moving into our assessment of our program as it was this last year. So you should have all received the TaskStream report, the ASB4, and Jessica, remind me what the other one was. There was 3 documents that Jessica sent. So first of all, thank you everybody for getting your TaskStream scores in, for doing all of that. It helped be able to run everything. We have the whole kit and caboodle. Fields there, everything's there. So, I know that that's a huge lift. So I want to thank everybody, for doing that. Thank you so much, because it really helps give us a view of the program at this point. So,
Kathy, I have to go in to get my blood work done.
Okay.
But so I don't know if you want to start with the junior and senior surveys first.
Yeah. And then you come back. So it shouldn't take you very long.
No, I'm just going to mute you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jess. We don't really want to see you get your blood drawn, so you can turn your camera off or your video off anyway. So let's just take a quick look. I'm going to start with the graduation because there was some very interesting, did you guys all have a chance to take a look at that?
Mm-hmm.
There were some first of all, our guys are getting jobs.
Yes.
Right? You see this?
I am so excited about that.
Now, we had we had a really high response rate. And Mark, I don't know if you were on at that point or you were making adjustments in your beautiful kitchen, but between you, I don't know what you did. I don't know, we know how many pizzas you brought in for them or what you normally did for them, but their participation was really good. So thank you for all of your work.
Oh my gosh. I just kept reminding them, please, please, every day. Like,
I mean, it was amazing. Like they were like, it went from nothing to all of a sudden they were like, okay, fine, stop bothering us. So the good news is that we have a fair number, and okay, so like these percentages look one way, but to give you the actual numbers to kind of give you an idea of how many people we're talking about. So we have a fair number of students, at least in the senior class, that actually were employed in a social work or a related field.
Already.
27% out of 64. And there are 73 seniors. So that's a pretty high response rate. It's around like 88%. But when we look at after graduation, it jumps to 50%. So the good news is they're getting jobs.
Yes.
It's not exactly clear all of what jobs they're getting, but we do have a little sampling down at the end of the table. So, and some are staying either in areas, either they're moving into areas that are unrelated to social work, or they're staying in their current unrelated jobs because they're moving into graduate school. It's a little hard. This is not the most sophisticated survey, just to kind of get a taste of what they're doing. So you can see that there's a large percentage of, there's 14% that go right from their graduation and they get hired by their placement agencies.
Yeah.
So, and if they don't get hired by their placement agencies, they get hired by a different agencies. So they're definitely getting out there.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Kathy, and I know there's no way to sort of capture it.
Yeah.
But some of the students who are getting hired in agencies they did not intern in are getting hired in agencies which are connected to their field agency through a collaborative relationship or something of that nature.
Oh, that's really,
So that's a lot. Cool. That's a lot of conversation that I've had with the agencies and with the students. They may not necessarily go directly with their agency, but because of this need to support and grow our community of social workers through collaboration relationships. Some of the collabs have decided to look at students as internal candidates because they were connected to an agency with a collaboration, which I thought was incredibly cool.
Yeah, and well, you know, we can try to add a question to tease some of that out next time. So that's a good point, that it's through their work at their placement agency that they got known by somebody else. So that's really good. Jessica, are you raising your hand or you want help because the vampires are getting you, or? Okay, so, so that's a good point. So you can see that if after graduation, they're not going to be employed in a large percentage of them are going on to get their master's degree. So, and not all of them are going to UB, by the way, just FYI. We always have a few students every year that decide, you know what, I'm going to go do something completely different. And that's fine. And we've got some that haven't started looking and, or they're already whatever employed. I just did this because I was curious, like, are they getting full-time jobs? Are they getting part-time jobs? So the majority of the ones that answered these questions, for the most part, they all answered the questions that the grouping, they're getting full-time jobs. I'm not sure what the DNA is. I can't remember why that's there. But anyway, after graduation, are they going to do advanced standing? Clearly, the majority of them are doing advanced standing, but not everybody does. And here's where they're going. So this year we had Roberts Westland show up in Hunter College, which is down in the city. And Damon Lehman College, it was unclear what the graduate degree was. I'm assuming it's MSW, but I don't know. And there were 3 that said, I'm going for my MSW, but they didn't specify where they were going. But one of them is getting a master's in counseling. So We've got a bunch going to the University of Albany. We've got a bunch, obviously the favorite is University of Buffalo, but there's a few others. And then I found this to be interesting. So this is sort of the ones that were able to answer the question, where are you going and what's your salary? So the good news is they're, for the most part, they're making over $15 an hour. That's good news. And you can definitely see that if you can get in with one of the counties, that's going to be a good thing. So any questions about that? And
well, real quickly, when you go to Evergreen, Evergreen is one of the agencies that's connected to a collaboration. Anything related to Niagara County is connected to Niagara County Medical Center. I mean, corrections. It is so cool to see these guys get jobs. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I don't want to do that. Okay. So I just wanted to start that because it's good news and they're doing cool stuff and they're getting jobs. So that's a good thing. You want them to have a job. That's a really good bet. So this one, the other thing that we ask, hold on. Apparently after a year of doing this, I still don't know how to operate Zoom. This one here is the implicit survey. So implicit meaning it's sort of like your corporate culture, hey, how do you feel about us, the program? Not necessarily, well, yes, us, sort of like the ambiance of it. So we got again, out of total of 73 seniors, we got 64 that responded. This is one of the higher, in like 2020, understandably so, our response rate was low because everything was pretty crazy at that time. But even in 2019, so this was a pretty good year for response rates, which I was glad. So what this does is it looks at these questions and it asks, strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree. And what we do is we take a look at adding agree and strongly agree for some kind of with a total. So that's kind of where that comes from. If it's red, it means it's decreased, which means that social work department values me as a student decreased, strongly agree, went to 0, where last year we had, I think 1 or 2% of people said, no, I think you guys basically suck in that area. So if it's red, it means that the percentage has dropped, which is good because we would like to see more of our respondents think that we do these things versus that we don't do these things, right? If there's a line under it, it means that it's stayed the same. And if there is no line and it's black, it means that response rate went up for that response to that question went up. So in general, you can see that, oops, sorry. There we go. There's still some that, they disagree that, they feel that students, they don't feel supported, but a large percentage of them do. There's always going to be, and it's interesting, every year I do this, or I've done it for the last couple of years, there's always like 1 or 2 students that are like, they can't wait to click strongly disagree or disagree. Like, it's just consistent. Like, there's 2 or 3 of them that are just like, no, you know what? I hate you guys. Like, you totally suck. And that's just the way it is. And I actually, to be quite honest, don't think that everybody, I wouldn't expect us to get 100%. I really wouldn't, because there's no way that everybody's going to agree with us 100% of the time. It just isn't. And so I think it's really more honest. They're being honest with us. And I think we want that, right? Like, we want to know. But generally speaking, we did pretty well. Is there any of these that you want to look at in particular? I don't know if anyone has any questions about that one.
I think overall, as I look at this, and I'm going to go back to something you said, Kathy, every time we do these evaluations as it relates to implicit survey, we're always going to have the outliers.
Yep.
And part of, what I keep in my mind as I look at this is our scores, I have to say this with pride because I know what it was like to do field, specifically field. I'm thinking field and I'm being selfish about it, but the scores 3-2, 3-2, 3-3, those are relatively small scores based on the fact that we were working remotely
Yeah.
and we were working in the middle of COVID and we were working in the middle of the unknown. So when we went to orange zone in November, things closed down again.
Yeah.
So with all of those factors which impacted our ability to teach or our students' ability to do field, these are good numbers to look at. And I also keep in mind, specifically with the seniors, specifically, there were a number of them who felt isolated and depressed because they were here in Buffalo while their families were somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of this strongly disagree is relevant to the mental space they were in because of the pandemic, but these are still great numbers for us to see.
Yeah, I agreed, Karen. I think it's always, even given the gestalt, right, that we're operating in. I mean, even when we didn't have the pandemic, there's always going to be some people, there's always going to be some students that, for whatever reason, we just didn't hit the mark with them. And I'm not saying that and we would never, and this goes for task stream scores or any other type of evaluation, you don't want to design programs on the outliers. You want to design programs around the middle. So I'm not saying that, we should ignore them. I think that it's important to think about if there's value, if there's some piece of value or information that we can glean from any of these answers. I think that's really useful. I think, I think COVID and remote learning really, some students, if you have had a chance to read through the 29-page document, light reading, of course, but there were a lot of students that they thought, it was hard to do remote learning, but they made themselves do it, and there was some value that they got out of it. There were other students that thrived in the remote learning environment. They found it to be more flexible, particularly students with multiple demands that they didn't have to put travel time in and things like that. And then there were other students, there's like another section of them that found that just horrible. It was very, very difficult for them. So I think that given all of that, for whatever reason, these two questions, there was a malfunction, so that's why they're yellowed out. I don't have data for that. I'm sorry, guys. But I'd say that overall, we're doing pretty well in creating that. I think it's always important. Like, I looked at this and then I was reading comments to try to see if there was anything qualitatively that they were saying that could, help add anything to the quantitative survey. And I think that a couple of things that jumped out at me, and I don't know, you guys may not have had a chance to kind of go through it because pulling all that data out is really tedious, but there's a couple of things. First of all, I want to say that in general, they find us to be caring, supportive, invested, committed, and that we go the extra mile to help them. The majority of them, I would say, there's a lot of comments about that. Are there some comments of, look, we just like remote learning was really, really hard and it impacted, their ability to do the work. They'll say that, it impacted my grades, it impacted my motivation, it impacted my ability to be focused. I had too much distractions going on. There was all the having to share equipment. I found it interesting that there were several comments scattered, sprinkled, like as if they didn't really register when we were talking in classes about resources. like it just didn't register. Like one of them said, why didn't you give us free laptops? And it's like, I don't know about you guys, but I probably said it about 900 times, you know, here's the number, here's the guy, call them, they'll deliver a laptop to you. They'll like bring you one. So some of them are going to hear it, and some of them used resources, because we asked that question, like what resources did you, of college resources did you use? And they do talk about IT. A lot of them use the Writing Center. The library is the hub, and they really missed having access to the library when the library had to compress its hours, and then ultimately, so they definitely, and then some of them didn't use it at all. Like they just, they used us. We were their resource.
Yeah.
We were their resource. A couple of things, you guys will read it. A couple of things is just a reminder, like we put it in our syllabi, but, and I really don't think this is, I mean, there are the students that expect us to respond to an email within a nanosecond after they send it. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But if you're missing emails, like something comes up and you're just really busy, do the best you can to try to hit that 48-hour mark that we say that we're going to respond, because it matters to them. It really mattered to them. And it really mattered particularly because they couldn't see us and they couldn't sit in class with us. So responding to emails, even if you say, you know what, I've got your email, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Like communication was one of those things. And it was sort of not sort of, I really think it served a proxy for connection with us. So that's one of the things that I just want to highlight to everybody is please make sure, you know, we think sometimes maybe their emails are like some of the emails they send us are unique. I think we can all agree on the uniqueness of some of their emails, but even in their uniqueness, there's something, they're needing a connection with us. So we can structure and use teachable moments. Like, could you please use, you know, I got your email. It would be helpful if you could elaborate, you know, like please use complete sentences. Obviously you might not say that, but maybe you would, I don't know. You know, teaching them how to write a professional email. So we role model that, right? You know, we dress them by name, we sign our signatures. You know, we don't use, I don't know, nicknames and stuff like that. We because they don't know us and we're role modeling that stuff. So I just want to draw that out because I think particularly during these times and given who knows what it's going to be like in the fall when they start coming back and the adjustments, we have a whole junior class that has never been on campus or very limited campus. So they're going to see each other in person for the first time. And they talked a lot about that in the groups class. And they have comments about that in the junior survey about how much they're looking forward to actually being in class with us and their peers. So I just draw attention to that. Just please be aware that, you know, those unique emails that we think are kind of like, what? They matter to them. They really do. They matter. And I'm not talking about the ones that expect a response within a nanosecond. That's a teachable moment. Like, you know, if you sent me 5 emails in less than a minute, there's some regulation issue there. And I'm going to address it in the email. I'm going to say, I've received it. I will be reviewing your email and I will be getting back to you in whatever later this afternoon. Please hold your horses there. Okay. But so we can do that. So any questions about any of that? Any thoughts, comments?
Well, again, we're talking about seniors, and I usually comment on seniors. I think one of the other elements that might have been a challenge for them this year, we talk about the classroom, but we also talk about field. A lot of the students were remote, some were hybrid. Some, you know, there were some really dynamic changes which define social work in a different way for them. And I think it was a struggle for some to understand that practice doesn't necessarily have to be you in a room with a client. That practice can be through phone, practice can be through Zoom, practice can be
Mhm.
through
Mhm.
indirect work. So there is a lot of communication between the field faculty liaisons in the agencies to even help because the agencies were feeling guilty that they weren't
Right.
giving the students what they needed, and we had to say to them, you have telecommunication, you have Zoom appointments, you're doing this, you're doing groups online. Just because you've changed the modality of how you're providing the service, it doesn't mean that our students are not getting the opportunity. I mean, a lot of our agencies readapted their employee schedules to adjust for interns to be in the office 1 day a week at least. So they would have access to the office, they would have access to files, and so there was a lot of teachable moments, not just for students, but the agencies as well, to help everyone understand social work practice is happening. It's just happening on a different modality.
Oh, I agree with you, Karen. I think that there are practitioners that in the field that had to adapt very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let me just move. I just want to move through because then eventually. Oh yeah, Berg, I'm so sorry. You had your hand up very patiently.
Again, if this is not the time, we were talking about emails and stuff, and I was thinking, different reflections of for myself. Like, I realized being remote, one challenge is that like I couldn't see people's reactions to the information I'm giving. So I think that will be useful to be on campus. Like, at least I can see if people are confused, right? Like, I'm delivering a lecture, there's only so much I can monitor that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the course of the semester, I found that at the beginning, I felt more inclined to, like, if people asked questions that had been clearly explained and like, or were clearly written in instructions, that I kind of gave the beginning of the semester like learning curve. And then towards the end of the semester, there were times where I told students, I responded by email, I'm going to challenge you to use the written instructions posted on the website. And I'm going to challenge you, or I'm, to think about scheduling an appointment, like
Mm-hmm.
with this many days in advance.
Yeah.
And you want to continue to be mindful of all the challenges and aware of the challenges that students will continue to have transitioning out of the pandemic. But I also feel like in 317, I felt extremely aware of how important this class is to help prepare students for the master's, option to pursue the master's and prepare them, and thinking what is going to seem really left field as someone who's, teaching at the master's level. Like, how is an instructor going to take certain kinds of emails, and how can I help meet them where they're at and help move them? And I hope as a faculty that there will be space to have conversations about how we're having that and supporting them through this, like coming out of this really traumatic time for people on a collective level, and also towards where we want to be. Like, it's been crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that, I think that's it. It wasn't so much, there was no comment that I read. Now, maybe I maybe missed it. I didn't read any feedback in the qualitative survey that said, we didn't like the way that you wrote your email. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what was interesting. It's not that they just wanted a response. Like, they wanted to have a connection and a response. So they may have had a question, but they were waiting. Now, we know that it's good to keep moving forward on whatever it is that you're doing, even if you have a question. But that may be, and that's ultimately a goal where we want them to go. Like, we put it in our syllabi, right? Like, just because you're waiting on a response doesn't mean everything comes to a complete halt. That's not how it is in any practice of any kind. You move forward or you keep working. You might put a placeholder there, and then you'll come back to it. So it's teaching them professional skills. While they're waiting for an answer here, they're going to continue to move forward here. So I think in the fall, we can certainly talk more about that. Those are good questions to be asking, Berg. It's almost like we're going to need to have like a little introduction, like some kind of transitional introduction in all of our classes, however people feel comfortable doing that. But I think having them talk a little bit about, like, well, so we're social work. So what's it like to be on campus now? What was it like last semester? What was it like last whatever? And for the seniors, they're going to be like, so what's it like to see your colleagues that many of you worked very intensely on projects last year and you were in a box and and you were all over the state because many of them weren't even on campus last year. So it's going to be, I think it's a good point. I think we need to think about sort of, what's that sort of bridge that's going to happen with us and how we're going to help them with some of that transition. I think a lot of them are really, really looking forward to that. So yeah. Any other thoughts or comments before we? No? Okay, so the other one that I want to talk about, and then we can maybe move, and then we can start moving through the courses if there's going to be changes or anything like that we're thinking about, is this is the competencies from the student's perspective. So they get evaluated on the competencies, across the entire curriculum, right? Since they joined us, their junior year, their first year in the program, all through that, they just completed all of their senior stuff. But this is how they think we did teaching them. So there's the competencies, and that's all the task stream stuff, but this is how they think we did. Does everybody follow what I'm saying with that? So it's kind of interesting. Again, I think we did pretty well, just saying, given everything that's going on. So this tells you these are all the competencies, and we are asking them. This last year was COVID. Our response rate was like 50%. Still not bad, but we like to have a little bit higher. But overall, you can see that, not 100%, which that makes sense. But overall, we did pretty well. I mean, I think there's just a few that are under 95, like this one here, 12 and 13, but everything else is 95 and above. This one here, critically analyze policies.
Kathy, slow down for 1 second. Go back up. Go back up. Okay, so policy, go to 5. Go to 5.
5. Wait, that's 2. Never mind.
Yeah, go to competency 5. Okay, slow down. This is a huge feat for us because the 84, 82, 86%, this was a very difficult area to work with agencies and students to truly understand what the policy practice competencies were. And I think 419 and 429 helped to reinforce that a little bit when students understood that not only are they getting this from field, but they're also getting it from 419. I saw the numbers increase. So this was a huge, huge feat in terms of that. And then when you come down to 7, another huge, huge feat. And really, it's these numbers that bring me to my thinking to say, okay, we have to train field instructors, we have to train students, we have to verify how they understand this and how they look at it, and then how we understand it and how we look at it. And it's just, when I see numbers like this, I immediately look at training opportunities for the field instructors and students, which is why when the juniors come out and seeing where they hit, then it's like, okay, these are training opportunities we have to look at in senior year.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, so I think you're right. I mean, we definitely made improvements because I was here for some of this, like initially, right? So this is 20, 19, 18, 17.
Yeah, that was extremely
right?
challenging.
So
That was very challenging. Yep.
yeah. So, but what's interesting is when you read through the qualitative data, the surveys that they give,
Hmm.
the two areas, the one area that they really think that we need to improve on is our policy courses. They really and they were really, it's not like they're saying, oh my goodness, it sucked. They're saying, 419, 429, 320, and those were the big three that they talked about. They said there needs to be, those need to be looked at and revised. Now, they don't know anything about what we're trying to do here with this new curriculum, but it sort of in the general gist of what they were saying is that they want it to be more relevant to them and more relevant to practice. So when you read those areas, and that's under course. So the survey questions we ask about assignments, courses, which for some I've never really quite understood this, but apparently it started last year. So this is a new thing. They list the courses that they took, and it's like that's not what the question asked you. It said, give us feedback on the courses that you've taken so far in the program, not list the courses. So I have to look at the wording or something. But when you look at, so they'll give you feedback about courses, they'll give you feedback about assignments, and they'll give you feedback about the program. And then there were some specific questions regarding what was it like to be in online learning? What was this, hard things about that? What was the hard thing? What helped you cope? And what could the department or the college have done differently to help you with that? So those are those sort of COVID related questions. But when you look at the courses, like not everybody hates research. Oh, by the way, I just want you to know that both for juniors and for seniors, there's some of them that actually came to the realization that understanding how to read an article and research is not just for graduate school, but it's something that they can use in practice. So that's a good thing. The juniors haven't reached that point yet. So when you read the junior feedback, they're going to be like, why do we have to take this class? But keep in mind developmentally where they are versus where they're going to be at the end of next year.
And to comment on that, Kathy, just so you know, a lot of the field agencies involve students in quality assurance,
Yep.
evidence-based practice.
Yep.
So, these were hybrid activities for them. So because of that, they were in program evaluation. So I think because of what the agencies did, we saw a lot of students understand the concept of what research would mean to them at a baccalaureate level. So I really appreciate hearing that there is more reading of research articles.
Well, and I think that, some of the things that we've talked about related to, we're not calling it 317, but in, one of the core classes is called evidence-based practice, right? That's sort of where we're talking about putting I'll call it research related stuff. It gives us some ideas to think about how we could underscore and support that, because some of those activities may remain available to students in the field, or maybe, which would be great, but some of them may not be so much, depending on the needs of the agencies and where they're going next year or the year after. But it gives us some ideas to think about related to that. So research and policy, I think these, which is good feedback, whether we all totally agree with everything they say, because sometimes they say silly things. So when you read their comments, like take a breath, because some of them, there's a couple of them in there that are, basically we suck. So just be prepared for that. But there's always going to be those outliers that think that we're horrible. Right? A third of the people don't like you, a third of the people don't care, and a third of the people love you, right? That's sort of the general gist. But I think that there's some really good thoughts and comments about some of the courses that are aligned with some of the ways that we've been thinking about it. So we haven't talked to them about it. They're sort of feeding up to us what we've suspected based on what we have learned over the years. And I think that's a good thing that those things are kind of aligning. Yeah, Jim?
I think the way you articulated it, it really put something in perspective too. The courses, is it 320, 317 in policy? Those are the courses that kind of sit outside of what they see as relevant, like practice kind of stuff. Everybody always, I shouldn't say everybody, but they always hate research methods. Whoever teaches research methods always takes one for the team, you know, because they always get that negative feedback. But it kind of puts in perspective that in teaching, like on the policy side, trying to make it more relevant, you know, whatever we do going forward, helping them see that policy is, you know, it influences the clinical side of it. There is um, that link. There's the way you kind of phrased it, there really did kind of put the whole thing in perspective of the tension between what they see as relevant to clinical versus what we see as necessary for a curriculum. So, and we have to kind of make that, help them understand that, you know, leave some breadcrumbs out for them to see where it goes. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think that as we're thinking about, you know, integrating micro, meso, and macro into one course, Jessica just wrote this. Like, what are you reading my mind, Jessica? Stop it. You
that's
know,
good.
I think that will help. It will help us, and it will help them. And so I because they don't necessarily know. I don't know if anyone saw the comment that Amy put in the chat about
Yeah.
one of her favorite comments was they shouldn't have to do presentations because social workers don't present information in practice. So, you know, again, they say silly things.
Yeah.
Even though most of us have probably been saying, you know, anyway, so you just keep in mind that sometimes we push them out of their comfort zone. And that was important because as we talk about in social work, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is part of your responsibility to yourself, right? To become self-aware and do all that stuff. So
I think that if I can interject, I think everything they said about policy was spot on, though.
Yeah.
To be quite honest.
And again, it doesn't mean that I think what Karen, you were saying is that I think the quality assurance and some of the sort of evaluation processes or things that they use in agencies certainly made it real and was really helpful to students. And that's really, again, it's a way to think about how can we sort of make this more relevant. But I also think that the way that we approached before this year, that the way that we tried through the courses to sort of elevate the importance of policy and how that works and the different areas that one can work on in policy contributed to going from an 80, whatever it was, into a better competency score based on the students' evaluation of how we taught them those competencies. So, but I think now what we're seeing is, we've cleaned up a lot of things, and now we see where, the next level up, that where we can take it now is a very different than when we were back 5 years ago. So I think
I think the thing is about any if there was anything at the policy level in the field side of it came from the classroom side of it. I think that the disconnect, I think this is one of those times where the disconnect between the in-class learning and the field practice was because of the way the assignments are laid out in policy at this point. It frustrated the students. It was frustrating to me, and I think that I don't think so. I think that the issue coming back is very much in the classroom learning for policy and how we kind of fix that so that it doesn't seep into the field side of things. Because I would really, I would imagine that much of what was happening there was like the assignments just didn't, especially going to COVID. And this is one of those things, there's an asterisk because of COVID, but the assignments were really very difficult because of their lack of being in a agency, being able to do many of the projects and applying things. So I think there's just so much good work that can be done on with the policy classes, and I think it's an opportunity to open that up as well as, we have 301, 419, and 420. I mean 419 and 429. Three courses out of our curriculum that are focused on policy. It would be nice if we can open up at least one of those as something that goes towards an elective or another clinical type of course, and then really make the policy class hit home, where it kind of combines policy, but on that more active level of what do you do with policy? Why is it important to understand it? What do social justice side of policy analysis, if that makes sense.
So keep in mind, just so that you guys remember, what we had consensus on was all of our core courses are going to include micro, meso, macro, because if we don't tie it, if we don't interweave those things, even if we have, and I would love to do an environmental justice elective, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and we're also talking about having a diversity and equity course and having a social justice course, like whatever we call it. So there's going to be lots of opportunity to use that micro, meso, macro structure to interweave this, I think, throughout the entire. So the way that as the more we talk about, or the more, I don't know what you guys think, but the more I think about looking at how we're thinking about our new curriculum, and I don't want to jump right into that because I want to finish this part first, is it's really pushing it. You see how compartmentalized in many ways our current curriculum is. It's way more integrated than it ever was. I mean, Karen, you were here before, but it's way more integrated than it was. And that was one of the ways that when they started looking at impact versus counts with 2015 e-passes, that it really became a way to integrate coursing, course development, so that people weren't just like, oh, I'm just going to go off and do this, and it really doesn't matter, what Berg is doing or what Karen's doing. I'm going to go do my own thing. And it really shifted everything. But now what we're doing is we're saying we want our content to really, and our processes to truly be integrated, not in a rigid way, but in a way that allows some flexibility and some academic freedom in that way. So Jessica's come back from the vampires. So if we're okay, can we move into talking about, a couple of questions on the table are, one, we need to look at our task stream scores, because right now that is the way that we evaluate kind of where people are at the end of the junior year and the end of the senior year, like how did this, junior year compared to senior year. And then the second thing is, thinking about if we're not going to do it, what do you guys think about that idea of not necessarily doing task stream practice behavior evaluations in task stream junior year, but also keeping in mind of how we might think about getting a litmus test for the competencies without having to rewrite rubrics or anything like that. So to do that, kind of the point that Karen raised earlier. And then the third thing is I want to talk about an idea, in terms of how we might use 496 and 487, because there is a lot of flexibility in those courses, because Mark and I, and now Tanya, we've been teaching those courses, and it's like, what are we doing? There's some ideas that we might pilot some things as we think about, because one of the big decisions, or one of the things that we ultimately will need to decide is what, if we're going to do, and we kind of are leaning in that direction, if we're going to do a senior capstone project, right? What is it going to look like? Like, is it a bunch of big chunky, big intermediate things? Is it one big glump? Like, what is it? And we might be able to pilot some ideas in 496, 487, allowing us to assess practice behaviors, because we do need to do that, but also get some beta test some of these ideas we have for senior capstone projects. So I want you guys to think about that as we're, doing that. And so it kind of doesn't necessarily, like what Karen said earlier, doesn't put that in 493, 494, but it does allow us to I think, sort of have an intermediary, call it purgatory, I don't know, wherever you are today, but it allows us to practice a little bit, because I think if we take advantage of this, then when we ultimately make decisions, like, because remember, we have to design that junior year, because remember, 2022, we got to start the new program. The juniors the juniors from 21 to 22 will be in the old senior program still, because they have to finish. It's not fair to them to change horses in midstream. But then the following year, it'll be the brand new program all day long, every day. So see what we got to do. We've got to phase it in. So we have to be ready, and we have to get all this stuff done. So
And just as a quick comment, Kathy,
yeah.
I like the way the phase is coming in, because I have to be honest, I am one of the old school people. And I remember when we were phasing our curriculum years ago, we didn't realize that when we were phasing, we still had students in the old curriculum and had students going into the new curriculum. So as a result of that, that first year was so chaotic because we had to bring in adjuncts, and it was just a mess. So I appreciate you taking the time to organize this in a way where we don't have to be positioned to have, juniors in the old curriculum, juniors in the new curriculum, seniors in the old curriculum, seniors in the new curriculum, because it wasn't fun.
No, it wasn't. Now keep in mind, we're going to have to build it. So one of the things that, hold on a second, I'm just trying to download this thing here. And apparently, again, having done this all year long, I cannot do two things at once while I'm on Zoom.
Can you share your screen with me? Because I have the documents opened on my computer, and then
Oh, you do? Okay, hold on a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go. So one of the things that I experienced in 2015 when I came was that we were building the curriculum and doing the curriculum at the same time. And it was like building the plane and flying the plane at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that other people have had that experience like today, but it was pretty crazy. So we will need to build the entire thing and get approval for the entire thing. But as we do that, as we micromanage down, junior year goes first, senior year goes second. So like what you're saying, Karen, we're going to phase it in so that by 2023, right? 2023, everybody's on the new program. And that's going to give us 2 full years. The juniors are going to have 2 full years. They're actually going to have 3, starting their 3rd year. By the time our self-study needs to be written and submitted November 2025. So even though the site visit is 2026, the self-study needs to be submitted before that in November of 2025. So that's where I'm getting the timeline from. So let's move into our test stream scores and look at how we might want to make some adjustments to the current program. Don't get too invested because we're too connected, because we are going to be changing this stuff. So so what we like to do is to have 85% or above in all of our assessments for all of our practice behaviors across the board. And anything that's under that, Jessica graciously puts in that hideous red color so we can see it.
Yeah, so let me just, Kathy, if you don't mind.
No, go right ahead. I'm going to shut up.
I think Jim has seen this once and he helped with it last year. So he probably has a slightly better understanding of it than Amy and Berg, who have never seen this before.
Oh, right. Thank you.
So just to back up a little bit, you enter, if you're teaching 301, for example, and you have an assignment that is assessing practice behavior 1, you enter all those scores for, the 90 students that you have. Then I run a report and I look at those scores. And what I do is combine the total percentage of students who got scored as a 3, a 4, or a 5, because we've agreed that our benchmark, that the students need to be at a 3 or higher, and that we want 85% of our students to have scored a 3 or higher. So all of these scores here are actually the students who were scored in task stream as a 3, 4, or 5 for that practice behavior for that assignment in this course. And you can see that some of the practice behaviors, like practice behavior 1, there's a lot of courses that are scoring it, and then practice behavior 10, not so many. But for all of the practice behaviors, they're scored in field, which is 493, 494, and they're scored at least once in the capstones, usually at least, for most of them, at least twice. So when I went through that, what I found, and it's interesting because I think this is the first year that I've been doing this, so in the past 5 years, that I've seen this type of trend. Um, a lot of times we'll see like practice behavior 12 will have low scores kind of throughout, and it'll be one practice behavior that we know we're just not doing well as a department. So it looks like we've kind of addressed those issues, but for whatever reason, the students struggled in 422 and in 419 because all of the scores that are below that 85% benchmark are in those two courses. So down here, it goes into like competency 1, the score was a 74%. So 74% of students scored a 3, 4, or 5 on the assessment and engagement ethics worksheet in social work 422, which was scoring comp 1, practice behavior 2, use of reflection and self-regulation. And this is the actual rubric, like what's on the rubric to score. So it helps us to kind of go through and see historically what we've done is looked at this and been like, oh, okay, you know what? I was teaching 422 and I didn't really explain that that part of the assignment clearly. I realized afterwards that the students didn't understand what I was asking, so maybe next year we need to change the directions. I'm not sure about 422, but in because I've never taught it, but in 419, it looked like there were a couple on the Facebook petition. So it might have just been something where like they didn't understand that assignment. And then these down here are the needs assessment. So it's kind of interesting to note the trends. But if I go, and sorry, I hate when people scroll like that, but if I go back up through here, there's really not any PBs that are consistent across the board where students were under the benchmark in both 422 and 419, except for practice behavior 20. And in 422, they were close because the benchmark is 85. So practice behavior 20 is applying knowledge of human behavior in the social environment, person environment, and other multidisciplinary theoretical frameworks, right? And again, this is especially for, Jim, AB, and Berg. I would say that this competency historically has been one that the students have struggled with. And I think that it's less the students and more how we, I think that we're confusing them because we're calling some things that are therapies, theories. We're calling some things that are, like we're taking these concepts that they learn in micro, but we're not showing them how to apply them on a macro level. So I again think that once we kind of change our curriculum, they'll see that integration of micro, macro, and meso, especially with theories. And I think as we kind of tighten up 307 and 308 and put that into a new course, that will address that human behavior component. I don't know if anybody has any like specific feedback about 422 or 419. I'm not even sure who. I think Kim taught 419, and maybe Jim, did you teach that with her, or was it Beth?
I think the three. I think the three of us taught it, and Beth and I think it was both our first times teaching it.
Yeah.
So if I
So it could have
remember
just
correctly,
been that, right? Like,
yeah. I would assume that there is part of that. It's 419 is we Kim and I spent the summer kind of redoing and creating a lot of stuff, and it ended up it was kind of like shopping on an empty stomach, planning the course over the summer when you have all that time, and the students just got there was just so much. So I think that there was a little bit of that as well.
Jessica,
Yes.
is it? And I don't know if you have access to this. Is it possible to pull up 20, 2019, 2020, this chart to see what the scores might have looked like last school year as it relates to the policy course?
For 419?
2019 to 2020 to
Right.
look at 419.
Yep, I can pull that up. As I'm pulling that up, I just want to point out too
Yeah.
that 419, other than the capstones, other than 429, but in 419 is where we're assessing the most amount of PBs, and so then that also lends for there to be more opportunities for the students to not do well, right? Like, so it could just be that.
No,
It could
I
be that,
agree. I'm just
317 we're only scoring 9, and 308 we're only scoring 6.
right.
So there's fewer opportunities for the students to score poorly. But here, yeah, so I have that on my computer. So
I'm just wondering what it would look like looking at it last year in comparison to this year. And is it the assignment that's the issue? So, if we're talking about restructuring curriculum and making changes, it would be nice to see, okay, was the needs assessment, was that a concern? Or was the Facebook assignment a concern last year like it was this year, so we can compare and contrast?
yeah, Karen,
So-
I'm
and-
looking
and-
at it now, and interestingly, 419 and 422 did not have any scores below the benchmark
Wow.
last year. There was
Wow.
a single score below the benchmark in either of those courses.
So
Okay.
can I
Yeah, they were
just-
excellent, actually.
Yeah. So, so let me just say, I think, so one of the things, because I taught 422, so I think one of the things that I think happens, first of all, it was the first time that it was 100%. There was no interaction in class. And 422 is one of those places where we do a lot of role playing in class and stuff. And it was harder to do that, even if breakout rooms and stuff like that, we did all of those things. So I wonder if part of what happened in 422 was related to the fact that it was for the first time 100% online. So that was a change in the way that things could be done. And two, the ethics conversations, I'm going to go back and take a look. What is 6, 7, and 8?
6, 7, 6, 7, and 8 is under diversity.
Diversity. Oh my gosh.
They're all coming
I think it was really hard for the student. I don't know if this is see, and it could be that it's the cohort too. Like maybe there are ways of presenting the information like that I might have done it differently or better or whatever, in terms of helping them understand that these factors, these diversity characteristics, these elements interface and influence the way they think about things. So I really think that we lost a lot. I've struggled with having 422 go completely online because there's just so much that we would do in the classroom that we were not really able to duplicate, or I wasn't able to duplicate. Maybe there's a way to do it. I just didn't find a way to do it. So
Kat, I think it's a great point because when you look at that, 422 and 419 were both offered that our first semester where we were fully remote. And I'm sure that had a lot to do, not just with us, but with the students, right? Like the students like adjusting to doing that. And I think your point is well taken that practicing those skills is more difficult without that personal interaction versus like through a phone.
Mhm.
I think too, it's like, I don't know. I kind of have my own opinion about this whole matrix, and I don't I don't find it to be super helpful. I think sometimes it has highlighted different areas that we were like, oh yeah, we don't do a good job of that at that as a department. I think we're already aware of what those areas
Yeah.
are. And I would argue that, like, in 422, this is all competency two, these three, but in no other class did they struggle with diversity the rest of the year. So I don't think that it's a good measurement of whether or not students understand diversity and difference.
If I can interject too, I put up the 19 to 20 and 307. I taught 307 in 19. That was my first semester, and there were and there were four that fell below them. And so I think to some extent I wonder if it's also a matter of first time teaching things. There's not only learning the content or the layout, but maybe also having unrealistic expectations, even though there's a rubric. I
Well,
wonder if part of it is also my error in how I'm evaluating things and where I think students would be or should be or whatever. So there's I, some of this might be just attributable to the way I'm rating things as well.
yeah,
Although
I
419 was three of us, so it would have had to been all of us kind of. But
yeah.
I just happened to when I looked, I noticed okay, I taught 307 that year, and that was the kind of the standout there. So either I really suck, or I'm kind of it's probably a combination, and I'm probably evaluating things in a I gotta figure out. I don't know. Maybe I'm either overreading the rubrics or thinking like a five. Can you get a five at an undergraduate level? And I guess you can. I mean, it's written at that, but to what extent are our students fives? And so maybe that's a conversation to have as we go through, Kathy, down the road. Is
Jim, I actually asked that question early on in 2015 because it's like, there's no way first semester junior is going to be able to
yes,
perform at a 5
yes,
in a class where they're hearing for the very first time about NASW, about codes of ethics. Not the
yes,
first time. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't get
Right.
discussed and maybe it's raised in 220 or whatever, but in 422, it's the first time they're being asked to really read them. Like, so that's the other thing. Like, I do think, to actually read and understand that there's a code of ethics and how do you apply it. And I think that there's no way they can get a 5
no,
because they're just learning it for the first time. So, and I remember Chris having this conversation with Chris to say, the first time through, really, if they get threes and if they get a 4, that's like spectacular
yes,
because really they're hearing it for the first time. So, I don't know. And short of, and I said, well, then maybe we should have a separate set of rubrics for our first year versus using the same similar types of rubrics. And so that raised that whole conversation, which was a really fun and interesting conversation to have. But I
yeah,
think in terms of really thinking about how to, like, so there's two ways of thinking about it. One is you use a similar rubric across the board that is applicable regardless, or you have a targeted rubric for first year exposure versus second year exposure. So we would expect that their performance should be theoretically higher. So second year versus first year. I don't know that explains any of this. I think, I'm going to go back. I did change the big case assessment assignment. We used a movie. We didn't use the Oliver tapes because
Yeah.
it was going to be very difficult to have them watch tapes and discuss and Zoom. Like I was losing them, like,
yeah.
10 seconds in, I was like, trying to get them to talk was just like a lot. So, I mean, I don't, so that's what I think. I think that part of it was that it was an online for the first time. I didn't probably capture all the things that I do in the classroom when I'm there with them, because I've taught 422 before many times. So I think that got in the way, my ability to translate that. The other thing is practice courses on the BPD website. People were tearing their hairs out to try to create simulations that were usable, and really usable. And nobody had good ideas. Nobody.
And on the field website too. So we were in the same boat in
Yeah.
terms of how do we create these experiences that normally are shared in a course
Right.
where you have direct practice. So it was a very interesting challenge. 419, real quickly, my thought about 419 this year, 3 different people were teaching the course. So
Yeah.
that could have also impacted the scores for 419.
Yeah.
I think also it really, you know what, I'm going to stop talking because Berg's had her hand up and then Jim's got his hand up. So I'm going to shut up.
I'll build on things that Jeff and Jim have said, at least I'm possibly feeling as well, that I think when I was doing, and just in general, I think while I was using the PBs, although it was not for this course, a lot of these questions came up for me as well. Like how are people, making that call of how to use the rubric, and like what are the expectations anyway. So I appreciate what Jeff said about like kind of recognizing the limitations of this as a measurement tool. And especially I think, Jim, with when you're measuring diversity, like it would be there. I mean, there's just if the diversity is so broad, I think if you have caught people like openly acknowledging and sharing their limitations, that's probably a sign that something good is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only giving like the area their strength at, because it really is like everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and especially, so I mean, if we're talking about moving away from PBs potentially at the junior level, I would hope that the energy goes more into thinking about what are the limitations of the curriculum rather than the limitations of like the scores, in a way, like what Jess was saying. So that's my piece.
Jim, your hand is still up. Did
Yeah,
you have?
it was it was just to follow up on what you said, and this is probably for a different day, but it on the assessment side is what is it, what is appropriate growth, because we have to show growth in the students over time. If they come in and they're already, at the edge of mastery, either we're undervaluing the rigor of our program, that it's so easy, a junior can come in, or we're setting ourselves up where we're not showing any growth over time. So how do we do that while and without making it so complex, like Kathy was saying, of having
Right.
different rubrics. But yeah, like what is an appropriate level of competence that we would expect to see a junior to have that's really good, but still has the potential for continued long-term growth that they should show once they get into their senior courses, and still leave enough that when they go to the master's program, there's still, they still have all that.
Yeah.
Well, I think those are all good questions. And I think that, we don't want to what's the word I don't, we don't want to over micromanage, but we also
Yeah,
don't want to like, oh yeah, whatever, like it's not all or nothing. It's not like baby bear and, it's not like mama bear, papa bear, when I got like baby bear right in the middle. So I think that when we go to think about, as we're building our curriculum, we want to think about, because one of the things that we're going to need to decide is where will competencies be assessed. And in that case, if we go to, depending on how we want to do it, we clearly, and this was CSWE, our program advisor said this to us, that we go above and beyond in terms of our assessment, and that too little assessment is not good and too much assessment is not necessarily good. You want to try to find that sweet spot, because you need to give people time to learn the material. So you're assessing them as they're not like, oh, you're so remedial, you're just learning something, but we're going to expect you to do what? You don't want that. And you also don't want to dismiss and say, look, by this time, really, you should know this material. So we need to figure out where is the best place or the best time. And I understand that, it makes more sense that the final evaluations for the competencies are done the senior year or the second year, because they've had time to learn and to practice, so that it's more fair to really assess both them and the program. So as we're thinking about that, we should really answer some of these questions that have been kind of floating around out there in regards to that. So
I think, yeah, I think it's going to be important if we decide to basically continue, but in a slightly different way, to report back to CSWE 2 different scores from them as seniors on the competencies, kind of figuring out an actual measurement that's valid and reliable, and measuring what we really want it to measure in the courses as far as the competencies, to make sure that we're doing what we are hoping to do in junior year to create a good foundation, so that when they get to senior year and they're being scored, there is a good foundation. So I'll segue that into this next document. And this next document is really kind of like a bridge between us scoring at the PB level and what CSWE wants at the competency level. So you'll see what it does is it looks at, for each of the PBs, this is, competency 1, it's looking at each of the PBs here under competency 1. And we've got the field evaluation score. We've got the senior survey, which Kathy had sent out. And then the capstone courses. So for example, 429 in the survey for program creation, in that assignment, they were scoring PB1. And when you average out those scores, 100% of the students were at a 3, 4, or 5 in task stream. So then what I do is we don't count the senior survey in what we report back to CSWE, because the senior survey, remember, is them kind of scoring us in the program versus us scoring them. So we have to report back to CSWE what the students did. So in order to get the scores for comp 1, I have to add up the field evaluation scores for PBs 1 through 5. I add them, divide, average it out. They scored a 98%. I do the same thing for every capstone score. I add up all these capstone scores in 1 through 5, average that out. And then CSWE asks us for the aggregate. So they want to know what 2 places we're scoring the students. It's field and capstones. And then overall, what's the score? So the good news is, and I'm not going to spend much time on this at all, that when you go through and you look at field scores, capstone scores, and the aggregate score, all of them are at 98, 99, 100%. So what's this? Policy practice for field was a little bit lower. I think Karen had already talked about some of those challenges. So that brought the aggregate down a little bit. But if our benchmark is 85 and our students are at 96, like, we're so far beyond where we need to be with the students that even though we're seeing these like funky things happening in 419 and 422, like whatever happened in 419 didn't then impact their scores in 429, 493, 494. So that's why I think that it's like a course issue or an assignment issue versus a knowledge issue, right? So all of these scores, like I said, through all the competencies are pretty high. Usually there's 1 or 2 that are below. And so then I put this, that information down here. I take these yellow scores because this is what CSWE wants. And I put those yellow scores into this document that gets posted on our, I don't know why. Okay, here we go. Into the document that gets posted on our website. It's called the AS4B. And we're assessing them. Field placement, our benchmark is 85%, and we expect 85% of our students to be at 85% or above. The second measurement is the capstone courses, again, that 85% benchmark. And when you go through this, Karen, I just need to get the numbers from you of the total number of students for field. But otherwise, these are all set. So
67, 67,
67, okay,
67.
thank you.
You're welcome, Jess.
So again, like the benchmark is here. CSWE only cares about competencies, so there's only 9 listed. And you can see I just moved over the field scores. They're all, that lowest one is 93, but they're all in the 90s. The capstone courses, the lowest one is a 96. And then our aggregate scores are 96 or above. So this is what we actually end up sending to CSWE. And I hope that that's helpful. Jim, I don't know if you have seen this or the previous one I just went through, but I know Amy and Berg have not. So I just wanted to kind of walk everyone through how we get to this point as a department. Moving forward, we've talked about possibly doing some type of like portfolio or some type of presentation or a poster project or whatever we decide this program option 2 is. CSWE doesn't care what it is. We just have to tell them what it was. And then we would put those scores in here. And really what that would do is eliminate that whole first matrix for me or for whoever's doing this for assessment moving forward, which would really uncomplicate the world in so many ways. Where we would really just be able to skip to this form moving forward, especially if we're moving towards scoring students on the competency level, because then we don't even have to do the second form where we're combining those 5 practice behaviors to get the average, score for field for comp 1. So, but this is what we've been doing for the past, I don't know, many years. And I think it gives hopefully it provides a nice little overview for Berg and Amy and fills in any gaps that Jim wasn't clear on, so that we all kind of have a sense of where we're starting at to figure out where do we want to go with this. Jim, you have a question?
Just a comment. This is an incredible amount of work that you did over the weekend. Because I tried to help with this at one point, and I just have to say, especially with as gorgeous as the weather was, this is an amazing amount of work. So thank you.
You're welcome. It was
The assessment stuff.
enjoyable.
The assessment stuff is like this crunch time, trying to get it all done and put into all the forms and stuff. This AS4B, they made some slight tweaks to it. In September, you'll note that the updated version was the version was updated in September of 2020. So we had to post the updated version. You have to update this every 2 years, and we weren't necessarily in the update year. So we had to update it because all programs were required, and they were checking to make sure. And remember, if you remember correctly, we were under review. So we wanted to make sure. So what is posted on our website is posted with the results at using the new form. So we are compliant with that.
As a department, we've always done the AS4B every year, just internally for us.
Right.
And then we've posted, we've updated every 2 years on the website for CSWE. I think that, I guess from that conversation, the biggest thing for me that comes out is that moving forward, what's going to be the most useful way to evaluate the juniors, and then what do we want to do for that capstone project I think, you know, for me, those are kind of the two things that after looking at the data and having, you know, spent time on it this weekend, like, okay, that's good. I don't think it's maybe the best way to evaluate students, but that's my opinion. Everyone else might disagree. So moving forward, like what makes the most sense? So I think that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. I agree with Jessica. We got to look at how we evaluate and make sure the consistency is there. I mean, when I did the field reporting and the data, um, we had students that ranked at marginal, and it wasn't enough to impact the field numbers, but you could see where the numbers went down. So I'm pretty curious as to find out why we had students at marginal. We had there were a number. There was just enough that said, uh-huh, Karen, go back and look at this and see, is this a training opportunity? Is this a teaching opportunity? It's just, it's interesting.
Mhm.
It's interesting.
I mean, I think that overall, and that is also reflected. So it's interesting, you kind of pull the data from different directions, right? So there's this data that we're looking at with the task stream scores. There's the way that it's all compiled into an aggregate. So there's that. And then if you look at the narrative information that's coming from the surveys, there is a lot of things that the students who completed the narrative, the survey, and offered opinions, even though they're sort of spot on in terms of areas that we want, that they're suggesting that we improve, they're also really complimentary and appreciative and clear that the program from their perspective, and granted, it's not 100% because there's always going to be those outliers, right? But in general, the majority of people, students felt that the program changed them, that the program helped them, one, know themselves better. That was a common theme. To think better, write better, learn about the discipline of social work and preparing to enter the actual discipline. That the program worked. So right now we're drilling down on all of the little details. So I don't want to ignore that. I think this is really important, but I also think that we need to put it in the context of our students are experiencing it. Whether it meets all of what we wanted to do is one thing, but they're experiencing in general, they experience the program in a very positive way, in a very useful way. They appreciate the rigor, not all of them, but so I think it's important that we have that context, because we're working hard to make this a program that when they enter, they come in like diamonds in the rough, and when they leave, they're leaving with skills and they're leaving with knowledge, and competency. Those are the three things that we want to see. So, going back to the question that several of us have talked about here is one is, as we're going forward in the design, what is the best way to assess and get a litmus test with the juniors on how they're doing things? So if there are things that we need to adjust their first year, I'm going to start using that term, the first year, as opposed to, we don't want to wait until the second year. We want to try to intervene early so that the shifts are reflected in performance their second year in our program, right? And then moving to competency evaluation is going to be, on the one hand, a bit more freeing experience for us, but in some ways it'll be a little harder, because we'll need to think about how we want to capture what is it that we're going to use to assess that particular competency. So we're going to need to have some I think pretty exciting and fun conversations about that, and I mean that genuinely. I think it's going to be exciting to have that. So let me ask this question, in terms of any of the courses that you taught, any of us taught courses, we've got the fall courses coming up. If there's anything that people are going to make like major changes, we should talk about that, just so that we all know what we're doing, because what Mark talks about in 308, or what Jim, I don't even know who's teaching 307, somebody is, in 307 versus what I might teach in 422 or whatever. Like we kind of want to, or 419, blah, blah, blah. Like we do kind of want to all be on the same page. So if there's something though that you like, oh my gosh, this was just like mind boggling, I really would like to adjust it and change this thing. What do you guys think? Anybody got an issue with that?
I have a statement, Kathy.
Yeah.
In terms of field, last year field went really late just based on the nature of the beast. This year, my hope is with field, I don't want to engage the students in any field practicum preparation activities until the end of the semester. So I'm looking at trying to get them through practice in December and hopefully starting interviews this year in January, because I didn't get a chance to do that.
So let me just so I understand your timeline, Karen.
Yeah.
So does that mean you'd be kind of going back to what you've done before, which is that orientation would be?
I'm gonna always do the orientation, and the Career Development Center is always gonna do their component. And I
Okay.
want to make sure that I do a workshop with them around the strength base. So you're looking at 3 meetings with the juniors during the month of December.
Okay. I think that's good, because I think they really, they lost their spring break. Like that's a theme too.
Right.
They lost their spring break. Then they, some of them felt, it's their opinion, of course. They felt like they lost their winter break. They
Right.
just felt drained. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's ways to support the preparation,
Mm-hmm.
the prep, in any of our courses, that if
Mhm.
for those of us that are teaching the first year,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe there's some ways that we can, I don't know what that would be, but I mean,
Well, I don't have any dates yet because I haven't met with the Career Development Center, because
okay,
before they meet with me for orientation, they're required to go through the Career Development Center. And last year, Denise was nice enough to just work with just our seniors and do a workshop around that. So I have to see where Denise is with that and see if she's still comfortable doing that, because I love that idea that it was just our students and nobody else. So she was able to focus in and give them the information they
Mhm.
needed. Mm-hmm.
Now, when you say you do interviews in January, are
Mm-hmm.
you thinking that you would do these like over Zoom? Would you take advantage of that?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going to take advantage of Zoom. Yep.
Um,
And just as a sidebar, while the students might have complained about January, they weren't doing the time with me in vain. They earned field hours for that. So
no,
it wasn't, yeah, I
no, I
understand that they were,
understand.
yeah, they earned field hours. So my intent is for the preparation of field, now having that be something where juniors can walk into the senior year with field hours because of the time they commit to the career development center or field orientation with me or a training session with me, because there's going to be 3 sessions.
So you know what I think what might help too
Mm-hmm.
is when you don't necessarily have to know the dates perhaps, but if you could create just a quick synopsis, like we can put that in the first year syllabus so that they
Okay.
know. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like I think for them, just like any of us, right? Like heads up helps, and they
Okay.
don't feel surprised, and then they can plan for it. Like we can
Okay.
say, here's what's going to happen at the end of the, like in December.
Mm-hmm.
So like, cause some of them, who knows, they may plan to go to the city, or they're going to go to Aruba, or, I don't know what they're going to do, but
Well, all three of them are going to be Zoom. The only thing that's not going to be Zoom is field orientation, and I'm going to take advantage of that while the students are here. I usually do the first Friday in December.
Yeah.
That's always been how it's been before COVID, because it involves seniors.
Yeah.
That's a really big day.
so I just think that if we can give them information ahead of time, then they can
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I think that's a good idea because they get so overwhelmed at the end of the semester. I feel like in the fall, especially once they come back from Thanksgiving break, like they're just a mess. And then
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're always, and maybe I just hear it a lot, but I feel like they're always like scrambling and they're like, wait, what is this field thing? And when is this field thing? And they're asking me questions. So I'm referring them back to their emails. So it could be something, Karen, like if you know it's going to be the first Friday in December or something like that, we can even add it to our junior syllabi,
Mhm, mhm.
our course schedule, so that like they're seeing it in all 5 classes, and so that we can support you in that, so they're not scrambling and they're not like, you didn't tell us, and all the other nonsense that they.
Well, and the other part everybody needs to remember is that last year was the first year this happened. Usually I'm in someone's class in the first couple weeks of school. I'm introducing it to them. They see me. They have to sign documentation proving that they saw me. So this was a reaction to not being on campus.
Yeah.
So yeah, normally I would, and I'm thinking how helpful that was versus last year, but I like the idea of the syllabus, just putting it in there. But I might also visit classrooms and say, hi, I exist. This is what you need to do. Here are the dates that you need to be involved. When you sign this, you're committing yourself to these dates, so you know these dates are coming. I mean, it not only is it in the syllabus, but you also have the dates, and it's been introduced to you by me very clearly and very specifically as to what you need to do.
Right. I mean, that was helpful. I taught 422 during that time when you would come to class and stuff. I think also I was teaching that class when you made the transition to like this very specific dates with the CDC, with the Career Development Center. And because they're all, for the most part, they were all in there. We used 422 to really communicate. Not that you can't, I think all of our classes can communicate it, because like Jessica's saying, they're hearing it multiple times.
Yep.
And they're getting it from all of us. So there's no, their anxiety level gets high anyway when they start to think about doing their internship. It's a scary thing for them. Even though they're getting a lot of information about it, they have all sorts of anxiety about what that actually means, because it's scary.
And I think the big part, but you guys have seen me in practice around this, when I say to students, calm down, don't worry, it's going to be fine. I mean, those kinds of messages, you could say, you don't know Professor Etman, but if Professor Etman was here, she would say, don't worry, you'll be fine. She's walking with you. You don't have to do this by yourself. This is not the same scenario you did before. I mean, don't push the panic button. I mean, that kind of reinforcement de-escalates them. And I found that in going from December into February, there was less anxiety. Even there are students who I just received information from one agency last week to get students out for their interviews. I didn't send their emails out till Saturday, and there wasn't anxiety. It was like, okay, Edmund said it's okay, it's going to be fine, it takes time, and that sort of thing.
That's true, Karen. I don't mean to step in, but that's all true. But information coming from all of us consistently will reduce even that.
More stress.
Because that there is that element. Again, information provides them a framework, so that when we tell them, look, it's going to be fine, take a breath, whatever, and they're like, yeah, but I still don't know.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
I
important
will write myself
Yeah.
a note to come up with some kind of field spoiler alert for all the junior syllabi after
And
I talk to Denise at Career Development Center.
and I mean, I know there's time to do it, but I think we can help support,
Yep.
and then they also see us as integrated, and that's a good thing too. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, so anyway.
I know in the past,
Go
Karen,
ahead, Jessica.
in the past, I know you've felt isolated on your, island of field. And so I think that us adding this to the syllabus, and if there's other things that we can do, especially, I think with the juniors, maybe we have a more integrated conversation, or with the seniors, we have a more integrated conversation. But if there's other things that we can do to support field throughout the curriculum, I think it's good for all of us to be kind of prepping them for field in different ways to support you and to support that, and to make it not seem like it's an island and completely separate, because it really isn't.
Hmm.
So if
No, it's
there's
not.
other things that you come up with that you think would be helpful, let us know.
I will.
Adding that to the syllabi, I think they'll at least, they'll see it 12 different times instead of the email that someone they haven't met yet sent them.
But the other part to that is when you talk about that field feedback and integration, that's where the field agencies come in. So I would really say to the field agencies, if we were to, throughout our classes, our junior classes, what suggestions would you want integrated, or what thoughts would you want integrated in the classes? And I usually do their training in August. So I will gather information from them and see what they have to say.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. I raised my hand, Kathy, because I am teaching intro this summer, which I've never taught at Buff State, and I'm looking at the course revision that we just did for intro, plus the course revision that we did for 301,
Mhm.
and I am finding that there's a ton of overlap between the two courses, which is giving me like heart palpitations, because I'm teaching both of them starting next week. And so
Oh.
um, if I don't know who's teaching 220 and 301 next year in the fall and spring, but I see Berg raised her hand. I I'm not saying that you have to do work over the summer, but I'm gonna really try to stick to kind of those course revisions and really separate the two classes out. And as I do that, I'm kind of looking forward to the knowledge and skills that we have kind of divided for the new curriculum. And I really want to start to kind of push 301 in the direction of becoming that social justice class,
Mhm.
and pulling everything else out to put into 220. Um, so if there's anybody who has any insight on those, like Jim, I know you're doing a lot of social justicey extracurricular stuff. So I would love just your insight on it, but I also don't want anyone to feel like they have to work on it this summer. But I think it will be helpful for our transition to the new curriculum.
I think that's a great idea. I
Yeah.
really do think if we're gonna create a diversity class, and then 301 being the social justice class, because in essence, a lot of the 301 practice was in essence social justice. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I
I
already
think,
talked a lot about social movements, so
Yeah,
being able to narrow that down and
yep,
pull some stuff out, it'll be cleaner.
yep.
I think you guys, this is an opportunity to think about how we can start to create, play, test ideas that are supporting the decisions we've already made. Like maybe we didn't label the 301 the social justice class, but we've talked about that. We're going to have an intro class. So, what does that intro class really need to have? And then we can also then, like what Jessica's saying, is like, okay, let's see where that redundancies are so we can start to separate those things out. So that means that, like, for example, 320, I know that class needs, is probably gonna change a little bit here because we're, you know,
I'm gonna
stuff
throw it
that
in the
we're,
garbage is how it's gonna change, Catherine.
what's that?
Start it on fire and throw it in the garbage.
Okay, well, we can do that too.
There's
You know,
actually, I think a lot of the major points from 320 make sense to go in 220 as I'm introducing like the settings that social workers work in.
yep.
Um, so I have no idea what I'm gonna do for 320 in the spring. I think I'm scheduled to teach that in the spring.
Mhm.
That I have no idea. I can't even think that far ahead. But for fall, I definitely want to look at 220 and 301. And Jim, I don't know if you were going to comment about the social justice part.
Amy put together a great, and I think it kind of dovetailed with what you had done in the course too, because we got 301 from you, and Amy put together a great project that was a series of what I call deliverables. And for me, what it ended up being was really kind of this progressive building up of how to do an advocacy, kind of create an advocacy movement from writing a letter, seeking support, all the way to, putting together videos um, uh, and fact sheets and all kinds of stuff. So I don't know if there's anything in there if Amy wants to pass along, but I thought it played really well. I think the students really responded well to that, and they saw the hit on writing, helping them with their writing ability. It made things more applicable because they had to actually do it instead of. So I thought it was a really great assignment, and Amy had it leads into social justice, even though I don't think we were planning it as a social justicey kind of thing. I think it really did lend itself to it, though.
Yeah, I definitely love the directions for that and to take a look at that. I think
Yeah.
is over our conversations over the next day and a half or 2 days or however long we have them. And we start to separate out because letter writing was always something that was like in 419. So, and the students consistently complain about us being redundant.
Yeah.
So I think just kind of figuring out like, okay, where do these different pieces belong so that
Yeah.
there's not that repetition, but that I'm still, like I want to keep what's working,
Yeah.
and then maybe there's places where we move different pieces around to a more appropriate class or whatever, but we won't know that till we get to our curriculum conversation this afternoon.
So
And it
just
might be nice to move it.
Just,
So
just,
Yeah.
just my question is for the book you're using for intro, is it still DuBois?
Karen, I wasn't planning to teach intro, so I'm not sure
Okay,
what
okay,
Chanel was gonna teach.
okay.
So I assume that she ordered a book.
Because DuBois is a good book to use for intro just because it lays out the scope in the historical context of practice. And in that book, chapter 9, they talk about social work roles. Chapter 10 is policy. Chapter, I think, 3, it talks about communication cycles. Chapter 4 talks about social work agencies. So it's alluding to some of the conversations you're talking about. It's covering every last one of those components. And as you get to the end of the book, it gets into specialities of social work practice, like mental health, older adults, families, and children.
Yeah.
And I have an
Mhm.
extra copy if you want. I,
I
yeah.
did order some book, but I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't remember which book it was that I ordered. One of the things that I'd actually like to do for intro, um, I went to the open educational resources training and I think I always had a conflict, especially in like the poverty class, like knowing that our students are struggling and I'm teaching a class about poverty and then I'm like, hey, go buy this textbook that's $200
Mhm.
that you're probably never going to open and read any of it anyways. So I have really tried to find free resources for the students, but I like having the textbook as kind of a guide for me to set up my syllabus and kind of structure the lectures.
Hmm.
So one of the things for 220 that I'm looking at is using resources from NASW. They have a lot of podcasts.
Yes,
They have
yes.
Hmm.
the Social Work Advocate magazine. They have a blog. And I think that it will help students to get oriented to the profession using those
Yes.
resources, and like the blogs are shorter and more engaging than like read this chapter in a textbook, but I can take that textbook and use that information to create the lecture to make sure that there's no gaps. So
And
that's
just
kind
as
of
a sidebar, so you
yeah,
know, Pearson has videos on each chapter too.
yeah.
I forgot Susan Piccolo, Susan, our representative for Pearson. They have access to videos that role play out some of the things that need to that are happening in that book.
So, Jess, feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do. There is an electronic copy of this textbook that's like, I want to say it was about $30. And all of the quizzes that they take, the online quizzes and exams have been set up as open book, so they will use it. I had them do a lot of reading passages during class and stuff. So anyhow, don't be shy to reach out if there
Okay.
at some point I'm going to take 2 solid weeks off from my email in June. But apart from that, feel free to reach out.
I'm under a little bit of a time crunch, obviously, but
Now is good, or next week is good, whatever it is.
okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so first summer session starts June 1st. So those of us who are teaching in the summer session, which I think is Jessica and myself, and then Jim's teaching second semester or second session, that starts July 12th, I think. I
And
can't
I'm
remember.
teaching first
And
session
you're,
too.
yeah, you've got the
Course by contract. Yep.
right, course by contract with that one student.
And
But,
Kathy, I have the advanced standing seminar starting June 1st.
oh, the advanced standing seminar with our recent grads.
Yes.
Well,
Hooray!
yeah.
They're going to be
If
so
they
excited
tell
to,
you that
to
they
see
don't
a
know
friendly
APA
face.
7, you're gonna
Yeah.
just have to hurt them. I'm just saying. Not literally, of course. Not literally. So.
That's going to be nice for them to walk in and see a friendly face, you know,
Yeah,
because
it
they're so
is.
scared
Yeah.
of graduates.
Yeah,
and
it
stuff,
is.
I
so,
like it. I like it.
Yeah.
It's good.
They
Well,
talk about it every year how they're like excited that there will be like Mark provides a nice bridge into
Yeah.
the UB's MSW
Mhm.
program. For the
Mark's
students that are going there.
Mark's their transitional object. You know, it's better than a teddy bear, you know? So
Yeah.
it's great. That's great.
Especially when he brings candy.
Yeah. So Jessica, that sounds great. So you're going to start to, you know, you're, you know, as we're talking about 220 and 301, beginning to incorporate some of our ideas and rethinking those courses, is a great way to start sort of beta testing some of the stuff. So that's great. So anything out like, so can we just, you guys, I just have to, because I don't know where this is coming from, but can we be clear that cognitive behavioral therapy is not a theory?
Yeah.
Can we, please? Because
Mhm.
I'm getting, my theory is cognitive behavioral therapy. No, it's not. That's a therapy. It's based on social learning and behavioral theory, but it is not a theory. So can we, like wherever we're talking,
Theory.
can we help them with that? And if it's written somewhere in an old, like, I know like some of our syllabi probably still have some of like that 250 different, I don't know if those of you who weren't here earlier, you don't get this joke.
Yeah.
There was like a time when our syllabi had like 250 different
Yes.
theories and perspectives, of which, you know, would take like 6 lifetimes to even be able to understand minimally. So if there's an old cognitive behavioral model theory, can we just eliminate it? Because it is creating a huge, they're not understanding the difference between intervention perspective and theory. So we've got to work, we have to help them with that. I guess we have to get clear on it too. So there is no cognitive behavioral theory. Just want to be clear about that. So if we could just knock that puppy out, I'd appreciate it. Because it makes them look ridiculous when they say my theory is cognitive behavioral
It's
therapy.
going to be on your epitaph. Is going to be, there is
Yeah.
no.
There is cognitive behavioral therapy is not a theory.
Oh, they are so cute.
They're
Oh
so
my
cute. And it's like,
God.
not only that, it's beyond your scope of practice.
Right. And
let's-
that's kind of the language that I talk to them about, and that's kind of the role Wendell served and now Ariel served last year, and Mark is probably going to serve this year, keeping an eye on those students who think they're clinicians in the field
Yeah.
and having someone remind them, no, you're not practicing at a clinical level this year. You're practicing at a baccalaureate level, and let's be clear about what that looks like and what that means. So not only telling the student, but also telling the agency, I understand this is a student who's like a paraprofessional and who has all these years of experience and maybe doing some of this work in the agency they work for, but not here. This is a field practicum, and if I have to come in and remind folks, because I'm okay doing that too. This is Buffalo State's liability insurance, not yours.
Right, exactly.
If something happens,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to your agency. It
Right.
happens to our liability insurance.
Well, and we talk extensively about scope of practice from an ethical perspective.
Right, right.
And
But
it
it
is,
but it but doesn't mean that people don't slide down the
oh,
door
Karen,
for you.
Karen,
It
I get
doesn't
it. I
mean they
totally
don't
get it.
slide.
I
Someone
totally
has
get
to
it.
monitor that.
Well,
Yep.
and we need to help monitor that. Like we
Mhm.
need to be clear. If we're going to use the word clinical, that pertains to MSW prepared people.
Yep.
You do
I-
not do clinical.
Too,
None of you, little
as
babies, do
as we
clinical.
focus more on case management, whether that's in
Yes.
all of our classes or
Yeah. I
Yes.
think case management,
I think
care management, that would be great.
I
Hmm.
think
Yep.
that's really going to help too.
Yep.
Jim.
I think, and this gets into the course revisions part, but I think that's where 307 can kind of underscore that, because I think there is a little bit of, from my experience in teaching it, when they're doing that life story project, we do kind of ask them to go into thinking about interventions and stuff. Like we stress to them, this is not a client, this is somebody you're just interviewing to learn these, and then we start to ask them to do somewhat clinical things in there, and I think that's an assignment that we can really refine to
You know,
remove that, so there's not
that's a good point. That's an artifact from the original 307. So
Yeah.
like some of these courses have artifacts that we'll like we won't necessarily see them, and then all of a sudden we're like, why is that in there?
Yeah.
Like if you were gonna, like, the intervention needs to be, the word intervention can be removed, and if you were to do case management,
Yeah.
but
That makes
you know what I
sense,
mean?
yeah.
Like if you were to do case, if this was a family that came to you for case management, or a person that
Mhm.
came to you for case management, what would you do? I mean, I think that if we remove that, because, and again, the practice behaviors that we chose to assess in these courses was before we even had this conversation about case management.
Yeah.
That came
Mhm.
3 years in,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like finally it was like, okay, please. So I think some of our courses have, like, I think I'm going to go back and look at 422, because I think 422 does the same goofy thing. Like it's asking them to think about intervention, and it's like, you just don't see it, and then all of a sudden you trip on a curb and you're like, what is that doing there? And it's like, so I'm making a note to myself to go back and change, because even when we were watching like Oliver, like I think that really was more,
That was clinical.
it was more clinical, and it
When
really,
I saw it was very clinical. It was
and
too
it
clinical.
really, and I got rid of, not that I didn't, I love Oliver, right?
I
Don't get-
love Oliver too, but he's
But-
clinical.
Right, but what I did was when I changed it and said, we're going to use the movie Beautiful Boy, I want you to just identify the dynamics.
Hmm.
How do you think about this? So it's case management.
Hmm.
It's adjusting their thinking using case example versus I want you to come up with a clinical whatever treatment plan. That's so I think the challenge for those of us, like, let's remove that language. Let's take a look at that. Let's be consistent. If we're going to talk about intervention, it's case management, it's
Mhm.
care management,
Mhm.
psychoeducational group. You're not going to be doing you're not going to be doing a psycho-expressive or an expressive psychotherapy group. It's
Mhm.
way beyond your scope of
Mhm.
practice.
Is that
Not gonna
something we
fit.
can do this semester as we, that, that kind of, that what you were talking about, what was it, was create practices, I don't, the three, is this a chance for us to maybe in this semester to kind of start to tease out some of this, or should we still remain faithful to what, to how it's done? And
Jim, I think that there's certain, without, I don't necessarily want to ask you guys to, I mean, I don't want to ask myself this either, but you like, I don't want to start changing because if we start to do all of that, that means rubrics have to change unless we decide in which we haven't made that decision, and maybe we can do that in the next 5 minutes. If we say we are not going to collect practice behavior information and task stream for first year courses, keeping in mind that we need to have some way of getting a litmus test of how they're doing,
Right.
right? And maybe that's using the assignments to say, well, if I was to grade it, right? Like maybe we look at it and go, well, how do you think they really are looking at the competencies that are assessed in the courses? You know what I'm saying? Like in 422, we do competency 1. I'm looking at it now. So if I were to say, how are they doing in understanding the code of ethics? How are they doing in understanding their own personal biases? How are they understanding their need to contain their own personal biases so it doesn't bleed into, with our work with the client? What do you think about that? Like, Kathy, what's your course doing? I don't remember who else is teaching 422. Like, I think Kim's teaching a section. Maybe, like what do you guys think? How's that? And we could write it up and say, okay, let's track this. So at the end of the year, when we come to our retreat next year, we can say, okay, those of you teaching second year courses, here's some of the things that we see that you may want to,
hone in on.
pay attention to.
Hone in on. Yeah.
Zone in on. So it gives some feedback without having us, look, we're not going to use, does somebody, understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying because we, as I brought up earlier in our conversation, this is something that I use to help guide how we teach class and how we do the training in August. Jim has his hand up.
Okay.
Jim has his
I
hand
think
up.
I'm teaching all. Sorry. I think I'm teaching all 3 sections of 307, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but like I would love, like I would offer up 307 as an incubator maybe for some of this, where we collectively say what would 307 look like, the way Jess kind of laid it out, and then maybe I can, and because I'm teaching all 3 sections, I know that I can kind of state, be the same thing each time.
It would be
And
consistent.
provide some feedback and where we can go, and if the group is amenable to that, like I think that would be a nice chance for us to start to see what we can tweak and then how it goes into the next.
Yeah,
I mean,
think that
go ahead.
makes sense.
Sorry. So Jess,
I was just saying, I think that makes sense. I mean, we can start to kind of, especially if we get rid of the practice behaviors for junior year, I
Yeah.
think we can really start to kind of pilot and play around with, especially the junior year courses, to sort of like begin to like prep them for us and move them towards the new curriculum, um, without actually shifting over, because we're going from 17 classes to 7 required courses. So, in 301, I'm not going to be able to take everything out that we would have in this new social movements class, or social justice class, but I might be able to start to clean it up a bit so it's a little bit more ready for that transition. And I think that we can probably do some of that. It sounds like Kathy wants to make some changes in 422 and 307, and those are kind of the engagement assessment theory, right? Like, and then we haven't circled back to talking about 496 and 497, that every year we talk about how we have no idea what to do with them. And I think there's an opportunity there to maybe do, look at that the senior project,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
maybe in those courses or in 308 start to implement some case management stuff. I
Yeah.
think in research methods we can start to like tweak that to get it closer to where we want with the new curriculum. I think 320 I can't even think about, but that there's opportunities in 320 in the spring to also use that to start to pilot some stuff for this new curriculum and think about how to arrange it. So I think it's a good idea for us to kind of,
Yeah.
without completely destroying the structure that we have right now of how the
Right.
class
There are
is.
places to play around, because I agree in 320 might be a great place to start doing some case management techniques, because it's closer to their start time going into field. I think research would be a great place to start having conversations around program evaluation or evidence-based practice, because they're going into field. I
And I
mean,
think Amy and Berg had some ideas about
yeah,
what they thought should change in that class. And
yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
think that keep in mind that we're still going to have 422, 423, and 424. And our
Right.
focus is going to be case
Mhm.
management. 320, if we're still going to do 320 needs to is a I have my own opinions about 320. I've never taught about it. I've run organizations, so I have some ideas about that. If we want to think about kind of what we want to do with it, but that's like that's next spring. So, we don't want to like start opening the floodgates. We want to try to keep as much
Much
structure that we currently have, but within that, let's
play
start
around with
Yeah.
play
some
around with it.
round.
So for example, the life story is a great place to talk about, tell people telling you their story. You don't necessarily have to do anything with it, but how, if you were to take that information, what did you learn about that person based on blah, blah? I think we don't have to have them doing intervention. I agree, Jim. That's an artifact. In 422, it's going to be like, I'm looking at 422 as highlighting, based on what we've talked about, foundations in social work and a little bit of applied social work class, right? So it's about basic skills, it's about self-awareness, it's about ethics, it's about, right? It's those kinds of things that we want to pull. So, I think what we want to do is to keep within the riverbank, but we can kind of explore a lot of different eddies.
Yeah.
I just want to go back because I think everybody's got great ideas. So let's start to play with this a little bit. Is everybody okay? Let me just ask the question, take a vote. Is everybody okay with not tracking practice behaviors the way that we've done in TaskStream for the first year courses?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Everybody's
Yes.
okay with that?
It's a vote. Put your hands up, guys. Please put your hands up.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Yes, Jess has got her hand. Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay.
Wave your hands in
Everybody's
the air as though
Okay,
there are
I
no
just want to
vote.
repercussions.
The official vote.
The official vote. So I want to
The
be
official
clear.
vote.
So no TaskStream for 422, 301, 220, we never did it. 308 and 307.
Correct.
Okay.
Hooray.
Yay. So
Correct.
that goes away.
Hands up. Hands up. Come on. Yep. Vote.
Okay.
Vote.
So, okay. So that was a decision we made. 2, those of us who are teaching first year courses, we may need to have like some kind of like in the fall, think about how we might pull together a midterm report, nothing complicated, and an end report, so that at the end of the year at the retreat, so now I'm going to put this on the agenda for next May, that we can say, hey, second year guys, heads up on this. Everybody okay with that? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
All
Hands
right.
up. Hands up. Yes. Vote.
Okay.
Vote.
So it's sort of be like a final year-end report for the first year. We are going to figure.
So Kathy, real quickly,
Sure.
does this mean that you're not going to not evaluate, but you're not going to have any conversations with the juniors about their first year? Look, you're taking that totally out where you do
No.
the focus groups? Okay, you're still doing those focus group
No,
discussions.
this has nothing, yeah, no, good question.
You're still doing that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
no. So that nothing else is, we're just saying us collectively, those of us
Okay.
who are teaching first year, we are no longer gonna need, we're not chained to practice behaviors.
Okay.
The advantage of that is now what we can do, don't leap out of the riverbed. Don't like go to another lake. Stay on the river, stay in the path, but look at the materials and say, okay, if I'm going to be focusing on theory, let me make sure that the theories that I'm talking about don't include cognitive behavioral therapy theory. I'm just,
Or maybe
as an
just case,
example.
or just maybe case management theories.
Or when we talk about
Well-
intervention, we're gonna substitute the word intervention and use case management.
Yeah.
And
If you're
Kathy,
practice
ever-
generalist people, you're gonna be doing case
Yeah.
management or care management.
ever
Right.
since we switched for 308 and just picked those 5
Yep,
theoretical frameworks, that has made a huge difference.
yep.
Huge,
Mhm.
like by the seniors in 497, like they knew those 5, they knew them upwards and backwards. And, you know, I
That's
don't know where they're
helpful.
getting the
Yeah,
cognitive behavior.
I don't know where it's coming from either. So I would just ask that those of us who are teaching any of the methods courses, just go back into our syllabi and look at that. Some of those course contents, we're actually going to send out all of the course revisions to everybody so you have them, because some of them have stuff in there like, oh man, we didn't change that. You know what I mean? Like it didn't
Yeah.
get caught up. So it's not, it's intentional. It's accidental. But you know, it's like I say to when I'm working with people training their dogs, the dog is doing the things that they think that you want because you've rewarded that behavior. So if you don't want that, then stop rewarding it, you know, like stop saying that or stop having it appear somewhere. So I agree with you, Mark. I think since we went to those big 5 and we stick just with those 5,
Yeah,
you know, when you come into, you know, we talk about assessment, we're going to be talking about biopsychosocial spiritual.
right.
This is a
right, right.
beautiful assessment model,
Mhm.
and it gives them
Mhm.
structure on
Yeah,
a case management level,
Mhm.
solution focus,
Exactly.
right? So
One of the things, real quickly, Kathy, that I wanted to bring to your attention, when I checked the website in the description of Social Work 220, I brought this up before, they describe 220 as having a clinical internship. And I think that that language needs to come out because field is not even a clinical internship.
what website? What website's that on?
Buffalo State, you know how you go check the classes and the names of the classes? This has nothing to do with Berg. This was before Berg, but I remember talking about it before. My concern is that the volunteer work is being described as clinical work.
So I'm guessing that is a really old, like it's an artifact from a really old non-corrected course revision. So
Right.
220 has been, the problem is the 220 is, I don't believe, I can't remember now. I used to know this off the top of my head, but I don't know if 220 is one of our courses that made it through or not.
Okay.
The ones that have been approved, you're going to probably see, I don't know how that process happens, but
Right.
I think there is a process where they come back to us and say, so what changes based on the approved courses need to happen in course description and stuff like that. So that process hasn't happened yet.
So I'm
So,
just bringing it to your
yeah,
attention
no, I
so that
appreciate,
you know,
yep, thank you. I think
because
that,
people shouldn't come in here thinking they're doing clinical internship anything when it comes to intro to social work. I mean, I know there are other departments on campus that are doing clinical work, but not ours. Oh,
so
good. It's changed to 40 hours of volunteer. Good. Good, good,
Yeah,
good,
this
good,
is
good.
what it says banner currently.
Good, 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 good.
Yeah.
Good, good,
yeah,
good, good,
so
good.
I think that, you know, we just need to make sure that we're looking at the, you know, whatever
Yeah.
the current things are about stuff, because there's been a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Good.
So we've agreed on that, the task stream scores, we're gonna come up with a final report so we can give feedback at the end of the year, so be thinking about it. And we'll probably meet shortly after the first of for when we get back on campus together, so that people teaching first year courses can have an idea of how you're gonna just sort of collect, what we're gonna talk about, so we can create, at the end of fall semester, everybody who taught first year, we're gonna write up a little something. And then
Right.
we're gonna see what happens in the spring, and then we bring it together in May. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good. So let me ask this question, because we're about 9 minutes over before we're gonna stop, and then we're gonna take a break. So for 496, 497, I want you to think about this, because this is an opportunity, kind of like we've been talking about some of these other courses beginning to shift. Think about using 496 and 497. It's still a seminar course, right? You're still going to collect practice behavior information, right? Because that is one of the 2 collection points for CSWE. But I want you to think about how we could create a beta test, some ideas for portfolio project, call it what you will. Like, it doesn't have to be one portfolio. It could be, the portfolio is like different sections, right? I'm still trying to wrap my brain around what it means. So Jessica sent me some stuff based on what they did at Virginia. So I'm kind of wrapping my brain around it. So I think that, is 419 a capstone? I thought 429 was a capstone.
Yeah.
No.
4-9. I'm not sure.
429.
429 is a capstone.
429 is the
419 is
Sorry.
419 is a policy class.
Yeah.
Right.
419 is not a capstone. I meant 419 also, adding to my comment above that. So all the,
It should be a capstone class too.
no, that we wouldn't do task stream and practice behaviors for any courses that are not capstones. So 301,
I
307,
gotcha.
blah, blah, blah,
gotcha.
and 419.
Is everybody
I
okay
gotcha.
with that? Is everybody okay with that?
My only question, or my only thought about that, is what's being taught now in 419 and what's being taught now in 429. And I know it was set up where half and half for 419 and 429. Would it position 429 to teach too much?
No, we're not
Because it's-
talking about, Karen, that's a good question. We're not talking about changing the content of the course.
Mhm.
We're talking about just not collecting practice behavior data on 419.
Right, but my
That's
question.
different. That's different. We're not changing anything 419 does.
Oh, I understand that. My only question would be, is there practice behavior, is there data collected in 419 that's not being collected in 429? And would that interfere with our second level of measurements? That's all.
Am I muted? No. We've never used 419. It's not a capstone course.
Okay,
In 429, we've just used 496, 497, and 429.
okay. I wasn't
That's
sure
what we
about that.
use.
Thank you. I
Um,
wasn't sure about that.
Yeah,
Thank
So
you for
is-
clarifying that, Jessica.
yeah.
So if,
We scored
the-
22 PBs in 429 already, which is sort of ridiculous.
Okay.
But, yeah.
so
Okay.
if that's the case, then 419 gets released as well.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so, but the capstone courses are 429, 493, 494, 496, 497. Those,
Got it.
okay?
Got
So
it.
what we need to think about, and maybe it'll be helpful to continue that conversation after we break, is thinking about how we can use 496 and 497 to assess practice behaviors, but do it in a way that allows us to play around with some ideas for competency-based portfolio. You know what I'm saying? The capstone project. Does that make sense? Like maybe
Yes.
do the first half, second half. I don't know. I'm just saying, think about it. Like, because 496 historically has been assessment. 497 has been seminar for intervention. That's how we've historically separated those two courses out. But that doesn't mean that, you know, like, just think about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's right, Jessica. So 429, 496, 497, and 493, 494 will all continue to use TaskStream. Okay. All right, you guys, so let's take a break. It's 12:15, actually 12:14 to be exact. Can we reconvene at, we were supposed to come back at 12:30, but we're not going to do that because that's only 15 minutes and most of us need to go to the bathroom and do all sorts of things. Is 12:45 okay? Does that work for everybody? Yes? Okay. If you need to take care of anything, you need to step away, just come back like Jessica did. She went to visit the vampires and then she came back. You know, Karen, you got to take care of Tanya. So, you know, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, I know that. I don't leave here until about 1:10 to pick her up.
That's cool. That's cool. So when we come back, we're going to move into beginning to look, we're going to begin building the curriculum. And I think the parallel is that as we're doing that, we're going to talk about 496 and at least 496, because I don't remember who's teaching 496 in the fall. I think it's Tanya is teaching 496. We need to be able to give her some guidance when she comes back. So, and Mark, you're here for 497. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody good with that? Okie doke. So go take a break, go get something to eat, walk around. It's a beautiful day. It's not going to be hot today. It's going to be hot later this week, but enjoy. And I will
See
see
you guys in a minute.
12:45. Thank you. Good work, everybody.